one of the dynamics that I think is less often discussed is that for Putin, there is a peace dividend. And this enormous Russian army that is currently concentrated in Ukraine, with peace, he gets to send that back into the Northern Fleet Military District, the Western Military District, the Central Military, the Eastern Military District. And all of a sudden, the Lithuanians, the Latvians, the Estonians, the Swedes, and the Finns, who have been looking across the border at pretty much deserted garrisons for the last few years, all of a sudden are looking across the border at battle-hardened formations who are now back in their home military district. So, the challenge to NATO's enhanced forward presence and the deterrent that it puts on the front line needs to, at the very least, not be impacted by whatever commitments are made to Ukraine, and probably even needs to be strengthened. And everything that European countries in this coalition of the willing offer to Ukraine needs to be additional to that sort of holding the line with NATO. And I think too often people assume that you can move troops from Estonia to go and do stuff in Kharkiv, and that of course is completely wrong-headed.
I think it's a very good point, and you can see that two countries that have not offered yet to have troops in Ukraine are Finland, with its long border towards Russia. Finland really has a very strong army defense, but they are convinced they need to stay there and hold the line, so to say. And the same with Poland, actually, who has invested heavily in its army, given historical experiences with Russia from time to time. They are not keen to go to Ukraine on this. And history and geography plays a big role in these, and it makes sense also, as you say, because it's a very good point, because NATO cannot afford to look weak towards Russia. If we look weak or come out weakly, weaker or apparently weaker from negotiations, giving up concessions to Russia in the Ukraine peace negotiations, we will have a big disadvantage in this situation, as you just described, because Russia will be emboldened at this point, and might find tactical opportunities to test our resolve and our defense and deterrence. So we need to be strong all over, and I think one part of that should be to be bolder in at the present state, and dare to put pressure on Russia. I don't understand why we should not do it. I was in a discussion yesterday with a former American official who said, repeatedly commenting on the Trump administration's negotiation process here. She said, the US is a superpower. We are a superpower. It's like we are acting like a dwarf, but we are a superpower. So the US is at this point not using all its instruments, and I would argue Europe is not either, actually. We're quite keen to focus on our weaknesses, our problems, our domestic challenges for politicians and so on. But this is the moment, really, where I think not huge efforts, but some congruent, bold moves could really shift the balance. Because there is some kind of movement in this process at the moment. I mean, there are some openings, but we're not really using it strategically.
Is Donald Trump essential to the peace process? Is there, if he loses patience and sort of disengages, looking for something different to do, is there a version of this that is brokered by Macron, Merz, Starmer, and von der Leyen? Or is America absolutely essential?
Well, in my thinking, basically US is a superpower, yes, and the big advantage that Trump has now is that Putin answers when he calls him. He lifts the phone and he has long conversations with him, and they seem actually to have some kind of exchange that is not only silence or not getting anywhere. They have some kind of communication, and that's of course an asset in any kind of statecraft or diplomacy, to have that link. I'm not sure that the Europeans leaders would have that at this point, because for Putin, having this contact with the US is, of course, what he wants, what he strives as. It mirrors where he wants Russia to be as a global power actor. So to kind of, from a Kremlin point of view, to lose that and have to deal with the Europeans would be a great loss. So we would have to force that on us. But one version of this is to be bolder towards the US, and say that, Mr. President, really welcome all your efforts, and we believe that Europe can play a special role here in putting pressure on Russia, while you have the role of kind of, being the communicator towards Putin. Now, the problem for Europe is, of course, we never really know what they are talking about. But if you just want to get that pressure on, instead of just waiting for the US to post those sanctions, which would be excellent, but will they come? We don't know. Will they freeze? They could take. They have $27 billion of frozen Russian state assets in the United States. They could, of course, take those money and buy weapons for it and send to Ukraine. Or, I mean, there are lots of things they could do, but they're not doing it. So one thing could be to kind of see if we could still work with the US and Europe, but kind of shift the roles a little bit, and for Europe to step up and take that risk, because in the end we also risk that Trump makes a deal and Europe pays for everything when it comes to deteriorate security.
Well, Trump makes the deal, Europe pays, not on terms that Zelensky or Europe really agree to nor feel able to deliver on, and all whilst reinforcing in Putin's mind that neither Kyiv nor other European capitals matter, and it remains a conversation between Moscow and Washington. And so I would like to see European leaders being more assertive, not at the expense of Trump's role. He clearly is important, but I fear that the choreography of things at the moment just reinforces to Putin all the wrong messages.
I think there is a big risk. What I really liked with the White House meeting was that the Europeans were there at the table with Trump. I think that matters from a Russian perspective. That gives a little bit of, they don't choke, but it's something that they notice, I think, and that he sits there listening to them. Of course, he broke the meeting and talked 40 minutes to Putin, but still he came back to them. So that's much, much better than Zelensky Trump, because Trump is a president who values, great power to great power. He often tells you that, Russia is a great power, and he enjoys having conversations with that. Ukraine is a small power, a victim of this fight, and for him, it doesn't have the same kind of shine to it, or not. And to be frank, not the same interest as well, as having this line with the great powers. So this is his worldview, strong man to strong man, and I think this is what we have to kind of try to take advantage of as much as we can, of course. But I mean, the fear I have now is that if we don't act exactly as you say, we are not seen as players in Europe from the Russian perspective, and we are not playing that much, to be honest. I mean, yes, we put up sanctions packages, that's good, but there is also always the fear of one country, often Hungary, then, threatening that the sanctions package will not be passed, or that there are problems and so on. So I think this instrument, even if it's described by the EU as maximum pressure on Russia, it's not maximum pressure on Russia. We have to be honest about that. There is much more we can do.
Agreed. Now, my suspicion is this factory that got hit the other night, that was US owned. It was a tactical decision with no political messaging in mind. But I wonder how thin-skinned Trump is, and that if US owned assets in Ukraine find themselves being destroyed by Russian missiles, is there a point at which Trump feels like this is an affront to America, to which he needs to respond, not militarily, but more robustly than he has hitherto?
That's an interesting question. I mean, he then tweeted this week that, why is Ukraine not hitting back deep into Russia and so on. He seemed to be upset about things, and that could be, of course, linked to this attack. He completely changed his mind because he criticized Biden exactly for allowing Ukraine to hit into Russian territory in November this fall. So, but that's the way he works, and to some extent, that's how politics works. You can change your mind, and in this case, it would be in a good direction because Ukraine needs to have that mandate, of course, for what they want to do. So yes, I think, but I don't think one incident will shift him because he's very solid in his approach to Russia. I mean, we recognize it from his first term as a president. I don't think he once criticized Mr. Putin publicly during that term, and we have hardly. Now he's been irritated, and he asked, what the hell is he doing, and but so a little bit more of that this term, but still so much more at stake because we have a full-scale war going on in Europe since past through 3 years, and he's still not acting. And I think it's not that the Trump administration. I mean, he put forward he said, so yeah, I will make peace in 24 hours during his presidential campaign, and it was put forward to him that the idea of putting maximum pressure on Russia as he entered his presidency, and then he could kind of lift that pressure while they were negotiating. But that never kind of reached into the inner circle of the Trump administration. They have kept the plan that they had, and which they presented more or less bits and pieces of during the presidential campaign, which was to kind of start with a range of concessions and meeting Russia, and then from there on negotiate even further. And a range of politicians, experts warned against such a strategy, knowing historically how Russia works. And I think that has been just proven right. Actually, the fear of a false peace, kind of just for Russia to take their breath and come again. We see not that this strategy of concessions or appeasement is working. And I would also say that, I mean, another proof of that is that since the Trump presidency took office in January, we actually see, we have statistics on this, how Russia is increasing its bombing of civilian infrastructure and hitting civilians. So it seems as if it's not that Russia will become emboldened by things that happen now. They have already been emboldened by the fact that the US is not showing enough strength towards Russia. That's the short version of it.
What can I ask then finally, because I'm conscious that we are almost out of time, how Europe and the US, NATO, can show real strength for Russia? We've discussed that it could be tougher on sanctions. We've discussed that it needs to keep going with its defense spending and properly do it. But what do you think will happen in terms of US disinvestment from Europe, if anything? And what do you think will happen in terms of a pathway to Ukrainian NATO membership? Or is that just dead, forgotten, never going to happen?
Well, I think it's extremely. There are things that Europe could do that we're not doing yet, and we should think hard about this and see if we could move forward. I think we should take the lesson from when the US shut off intelligence to Ukraine in the spring, and see, how could we possibly work or have alternative precision information channels or satellites and other things to make this work for Ukraine and perhaps also for us. This is something we think a lot about in the Baltic Sea region, because if there is some kind of movement from Russia, we will basically have no time. We will have to be able to act immediately. There are such small distances, so there is like the second one that we notice that someone is passing, we need to be able to act. And what if the US is hesitating, or we've entered a new phase where we experience something like that? It would be completely devastating. I mean, it cannot just happen. So we should, I think, these things, and to see, okay, so we can perhaps provide this to Ukraine also and to us, and see how do we actually fuse this the ISR with the command structures and who does this, what kind of software do we use, what kind of satellites do we have, can we do it in a European way, a way that it's not copy paste of American, because everything is bigger in America, we know that, but we still we still have things to grasp, we still have assets, it's not that we don't have it or could produce it. So there I sometimes lack the idea of being able to act, to what do we want? Yeah. So we want to be able to sustain and prevent that anything like that ever happens again. So how do we solve that? So those things I think we can work on. We could also, there was a lot of discussion on this troops, the security guarantee and the troops necessary and so on. That's a huge mission. But what if we do something smaller in Western Ukraine, put an air shield above and do some more training missions there, kind of establishing ourselves there in smaller versions, but still there for humanitarian reasons, for training missions. That will complicate the picture a bit for Russia as well, and that's also, we come back to taking a little bit more risk, but it's a risk that has to be weighed upon the bigger risk of not acting. And I think that we don't discuss that enough. What if we would just wait and wait, and we have Trump driving the car and he's just driving in the wrong direction, and it will end in a way that comes back to hit Europe much, much worse.
Fascinating. It has been brilliant to have you on, Anna. Thank you. Please do come on again. You've been watching Superpowers, the future of global security here on Times Radio. I'm James Heapy. Our guest this week is Anna Wieslander, the Director for Northern Europe at the Atlantic Council. For more of Times Radio's wonderful geopolitical commentary, make sure you like and subscribe the YouTube channel. But otherwise, we'll see you for more Superpowers next week.